In order to understand why milk is white, it's important to have a little basic lesson on physics and light. In the UV spectrum, which is in the nanometer range, each area of that spectrum represents a different color. Now, objects in our world and universe absorb and reflect different types of colors, and then our eyes read those rays and transmit it to our brain as color. So if you were wearing a blue shirt today, your blue shirt would be absorbing all other wavelengths of light except blue, and it would be reflecting blue to my eyes, and then I would say, oh, what a nice blue shirt you have. Now, black and white are a little bit different. They're not necessarily colors, but black absorbs all wavelengths of light. This is why if you're wearing a black shirt, it gets a little bit hotter in the sun than other styles of shirts, because it's literally absorbing all of the sun's rays. And white, you know, if you live in a really hot area, I grew up in the desert, a lot of people buy white cars or have white interior because white reflects all colors. Therefore, it also kind of reflects off some of the heat, so a white car or a white interior wouldn't get as hot. Now, what does this have to do with milk? Milk is a powerhouse of nutrition. I will preach this till the day I die. Milk contains all the essential and important nutrients that we need to sustain life. It's mainly made up of water, about 87%. It has about 4 to 5% of very important fats for our body. It has about another 4 to 5% of a special carbohydrate called lactose, and then has anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5% protein, as well as a bevy of vitamins and minerals that are really important. So none of those single components themselves are actually white, but the size of some of those components do reflect light and therefore make the milk appear to be white. So what we're going to do today is kind of break down milk into its various components, a little bit of fat and a little bit of protein, to kind of look at how it affects the opacity or how turbid or how cloudy water looks, and kind of recreate milk. And what you'll see is that, first off, let's just clear the air here. Lactose doesn't really impart any to the turbidity, to the opacity of milk. Sugars are really water soluble, and so just like when you add some sucrose or table sugar to water and mix it up, it might be cloudy at first as you're whipping in bubbles, but eventually it settles out and it's completely clear. Lactose is the exactly same way. It goes right clear into water. But the protein and the fat, depending on what size they are, do reflect light and therefore make milk white. And let's take a closer look at that. All right, to further illustrate why milk is white, we are going to do a quick experiment with milk protein. Now, I mentioned earlier that fat itself can make water white, or can make milk appear white, and it does help. But even when you have skim milk, which essentially has no fat, milk itself is white. But if you ask certain people, sometimes they call it blue milk, because it by itself, the milk protein by itself does make milk look white, but milk protein plus fat makes it look really, really white. And we'll kind of try to replicate that today. What I have here is a glass of milk protein isolate. I made it this week in our dairy pilot plant. Milk protein isolate is a special kind of protein concentrate where we take the proteins of milk in their exact normal and natural ratio and just concentrate it up. This started out from skim milk, so it has no fat, and we've removed most of the lactose, but this glass has more protein than a normal glass of milk. So watch as we add in milk protein into water, and you can see clearly how the water, with each drop, makes it more cloudy, makes it more white, and makes it more turbid. So there with about 5 or 6 drops, we can see clearly now that it's watery, but now we are no longer clear. We are kind of like an off opaque. As I add in a lot more of this milk protein, we get a little bit closer and closer. Now we're getting pretty close. Let's just speed this up a little bit and pour some in. And now you can see when we get like that, that right there looks pretty much like skim milk. So we have a little bit lighter protein load here, but you can see that as we add in milk protein back into a glass of water, that we can get and achieve that white color. Now what happens when I bring in some heavy cream and kind of add that in on top, you can see now that the protein plus the fat, let's give it a little mix here, kind of gives us that final amount of whiteness that we're trying to achieve, and that looks a lot like about 1% milk. So whiteness of milk comes down to not the color of the constituents, but the size of the constituents. And in order to show you that, I'm going to show you what the color of milk fat is. So here's our second experiment we're going to set up. So in our first one, we showed that just by adding protein, milk protein to water, we can make it look like skim milk pretty easily. Now to the question of what color is milk fat, just in case you don't believe me quite yet. Here we have a small dish of heavy cream. Heavy cream is about 40% fat. When milk comes in from a dairy farm, it typically has 4 to 5% fat. The milk will go through a separation process which will create 2 streams. Skim milk, which is all the components of milk minus the fat, and what we have here in this dish, which is heavy cream, which has about 40% fat. The other 60% of it is still milk. So even heavy cream has about 1 to 2% protein and has a little bit of lactose. But through further dairy refining, we can turn this heavy cream into butter. Here's a small mason jar. We actually took this same heavy cream and whipped it up. And by whip it up, I mean I shook it for like 15 minutes. And we turned it into butter. So, as you'll see, there's a solid mass in the middle and then there's liquid. This is a pretty good example of how 60% of heavy cream is milk. When I pour this off, this is what we call buttermilk. You can see that it kind of looks like milk, and it essentially is milk, but now it just has all the fat removed. When I pour this off, we can then pour out what we have. There's still a little bit in there. But we can pour out what we made, which is a ball of butter. Now this ball of butter has, this heavy cream has about 40% fat. This butter is now about 80% fat. So there's still a little bit of buttermilk that gets trapped in the butter. And when you squeeze it and press it, you can squeeze out a little bit more. And then eventually you get, this is just some store-bought butter. Once you get it pressed, salted, and formed, then you have this butter, which is about 80%. Now, in the dairy industry, we can refine this butter even further and make something that we call anhydrous milk fat, which is basically milk fat that has no water left in it. To further illustrate how this is 100% fat and this is 80% fat, and look at the color, I'm going to go ahead and melt these two down for you so you can see what they look like. Okay, now we are back and we have melted our butter and our anhydrous milk fat. Anhydrous milk fat can also be called clarified butter if you cook a lot. There's a process that you can use to clarify butter, and this is essentially clarified butter. But what I want to show you is this butter that's 80% fat. You can see here kind of at the bottom, there's a 20% that's still kind of milky in here. And that's a lot. Those are those leftover milk solids. When you remove those completely in our clarified butter, you can see that it is crystal clear. It looks a lot like a vegetable oil or canola oil. So here again, just to review, in our heavy cream we started with 40% fat. With our butter, we were able to remove a lot of that watery skim milk portion and make butter that was at 80% fat. And then through further refining, we can get to clarified butter or anhydrous milk fat and get to 100% fat. You can see that this has a slight yellowy color like most oils do, but you can see how if you added this to a glass of milk, it wouldn't turn the glass of milk white. It's the fact that it's dispersed in small particles in the heavy cream mixed with the milk protein that make your milk white. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this video today. I hope you like doing the experiments alongside us. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave them below. If you liked the video, smash the like button. Also, you can subscribe to our channel to get more excellent videos like this. We also have a blog with more articles if you're interested in learning more about dairy at www.buildingwithdairy.com. That's it for this video. We'll catch you next time.